We'll talk with Dane County Executive Joe Parisi about his 2012 budget this morning on For the Record. Good morning, I'm Neil Heinen. It's a heck of a way to start. Take office during a lingering recession that just won't go away. Know that your first budget is going to be a bear, and then find out you have to introduce the plan by saying it was even harder than you thought it was going to be. That's the budget hand Joe Parisi's been dealt, and we'll talk about it this morning. I mean, it was, Joe, interesting. You knew it was going to be a tough budget, but the fact of the matter is you didn't know it was going to be this tough, right?
Yeah, it was quite a challenge. We were dealt an incredibly challenging hand, mainly by the state and Governor Walker's budget repair bill and his budget. So we began the process basically $8 million in the hole in April. The day I was sworn in, that afternoon I met with my budget team to get an assessment. Where are we at? Let's start looking at options. What direction are we going to go? But in the end, through a lot of hard work and through the involvement really of everyone in our community, I think we did find a budget that struck a good balance, and we were able to save the core services that everyone cares so deeply about. We were able to balance the budget and even put forth some modest initiatives to deal with some of the challenges we face in our communities.
You know, I've done this show. I mean, Kathleen and I did this together for how many years? 14 years, yeah. Right? Yeah. And for the last probably 7 or 8, she would come in and talk about how tough the budget was, and it reflected the change in state approach to local governments, right? Yeah. I mean, the state has traditionally mandated services that it didn't necessarily fund, and it's always been a growing problem for municipalities. Having said that, is there something substantively different from this budget and the budgets that Kathleen has faced that makes it that much more challenging?
Yeah, things have been getting worse for a number of years, and Kathleen Falk did a great job of meeting those challenges. But I do think there is fairly universal agreement that this isn't a contest you want to win, but that this probably has been the most challenging budget cycle we've faced in generations. And a lot of that had to do with what happened at the state level, slashing and funding millions of dollars of funding, changes in the manner in which we're able to interact with organized labor. For example, we have a contract for the next couple of years with our AFSCME employees. Because of the restrictions that the governor put on collective bargaining, we were unable to go to our employees and say, hey, can we open up the contracts and see if we can renegotiate something to find some savings? Because had we done so, it would have invalidated their contracts. So we certainly had some challenges. And then overlying that is just the effects of the last few years and the Great Recession and what's been happening in housing and in our economy, because as we all know, Dane County is no longer immune to worldwide and nationwide economic challenges.
So you put it all together and it's an $8 million hole.
Yep.
You couldn't make up all of it.
Yep.
So how much of it did you make up?
Quite a bit. One of the first successes we had was working with the sheriff, looking at staffing levels, looking at the head counts throughout the system, and we focused in on the Huber Center, and we were able to close 1 floor of the Huber Center. That saved us going into this budget year about $1 million right there, because he was able to do it earlier this summer, so we had savings going into the budget, another $750,000 added to that next year. So we did that through Huber. Then because of our employees agreeing in previous negotiations to some health care concessions, we were able to go in and negotiate another $1 million in savings with our health care provider. So right there's $2 million. Those were the big ones. The rest came in smaller chunks. We had public-private partnerships and various agreements within how we're going to do business within Dane County, and we pretty much got there.
Well, let's get to some of those.
Sure.
The million in health, but first, the million in health savings that I understand. Yeah. What about Huber, though? How were you able to achieve those savings? What does that mean for our inmate population?
Right. What it means is it's the result of a number of years of some very solid work by our sheriff. Combined with that, a decline in crime rates. And so what's happened is the population in the Huber Center finally got to a threshold where we were able to move some people around and free up space on the top floor. And what that allowed us to do was, through attrition, unfund 10 deputy positions. So right there, when you're looking at county government, be it our human services, our public safety services, the vast majority of our funds go for hiring people. So when we can find efficiencies like we did there, that's 10 fewer positions, and so that'll save us that money over time.
And is that it in terms of cuts in the sheriff's budget?
The sheriff also came up, sat down with us and came up with an initiative to reduce overtime that we think is going to save about $300,000 also. So, you know, sitting down, working with people, relying on their expertise, the expertise of the sheriff's office, to say, you know what, we can do this. We can move things around, and we think we can find some savings. We think we can reduce overtime. It's a formula that worked, and I'm very happy that we were able to do that.
I mean, obviously, the reason this is so important is it's one of the number one concerns that taxpayers have is public safety.
Absolutely.
And there has been over the years sometimes some tension between the sheriff's department and potential budget cuts. But you're suggesting that that there's a reduction in crime that has...
Yeah, there's a trend that's been going on really since the 90s nationwide, that crime has been going down. Also, the sheriff has used very good, had very good use of the bracelet programs where someone can go out and then they're monitored on GPS. We also have programs where we're really looking at jail diversion, et cetera, and public safety is remaining the same. And I should say, when we closed down that floor of the Huber Center, that wasn't because we decided to send more people out on bracelets. I'm leaving that call to the sheriff because he's the criminal justice expert.
Good point.
The last thing we want to do is endanger people. But the number had got to that critical point where he was able to consolidate.
All right, and just if there are a few other highlights of budget reductions that folks should know about?
Sure. One of the things that I was really pleased about is, for example, with plowing. We've had through vacancies, we've had a hiring freeze. We had fewer positions in our highway department to go out and plow. So what we did is we have a partnership with the Parks Department where we have many people there who used to work in highways and plowed snow. So in the winter, we're going to have employees from the Parks Department come over and plow snow with the folks from the highway department. Same training, same ability to plow, but we're going to save about $400,000 by doing that. And we're going to have the same, if not more, people out on the roads plowing our snow. So you and I, our other people in the county, they will not see any reduction in snow plowing, but we're going to save $400,000 because we're looking at efficiencies like that.
There must be some fundamental difference between plowing snow and shoveling snow that makes it more desirable.
I would say so.
I think that's interesting that people would volunteer for that job.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's an example of our employees wanting to be part of the solution. I mean, they know how challenging this fiscal climate is, and they're dedicated to public safety. They want their community to be safe. They want the roads to be plowed. And you know, we had the private sector come in also. We have an agreement with the Clean Lakes Alliance where they're going to come in and help sell sponsorships to our Take a Stake in the Lakes event, and then they're going to help fund a county position through those sponsorships. So it's things like that. You know, we have the big $1 million items, but then we have a lot of smaller items, and that's what we've been working on for the past 6 months, putting all of this together to try to have a budget that works within the confines of this fiscal environment, but provides those services.
Okay. Nevertheless, there is a property tax increase.
Yep.
It's a tick under 4%. When we come back, we're going to talk about that.
Sounds good.
I am back with Dane County Executive Joe Parisi, and we are talking about his proposed 2012 budget. I don't even know what's the big number. How big is the budget?
Little over $490,000. $490 million.
Yeah. And starting off with an $8 million hole. Okay, the property tax increase then is just a tick under 4%, as I said. Joel, how did you end up there?
Sure.
What went into that thinking? Are you comfortable with that?
Sure. I think overall it strikes the right balance. It's about $26 on the average home. And you know, when you begin this process, you look at what are the core needs of our community? What does our community want as far as services? What do the vulnerable need? You look at the issue we were just talking about, snow plowing, that kind of thing. Those are all county responsibilities. And I think this budget strikes the balance of having a modest tax increase, $26, versus what it would have looked like with a 0% increase. If you're looking at a 0% increase, how many sheriff's deputies do you want to go without? How many fewer snow plows do you want on the street? How many literally abused children do you want to not be able to serve? So that's always the challenge of a budget, finding that balance, and I think this one did a pretty good job, particularly in light of the massive cuts that we received from the state.
Now, I mean, I want to be sensitive to viewers who are watching this and saying, would it really be fewer sheriff's deputies, less snow plowing, less ability to take care of abused kids? I mean, is it really to that point, or couldn't you find savings elsewhere that wouldn't have been so dramatic?
Right. The short answer is no. I mean, the county, as you mentioned before, with the conversations you've had with former Executive Falk over the years, we've been under financial stress for a long time, and she was an incredibly fiscally responsible manager. When I came into county government, there was no fat on the bones. The meat had even been dinged a little bit. And so if you look at where we're standing and you look at where you would have to go, the feedback I got from the community during the budget hearing process was they didn't want us to go deeper. They didn't want us to go as far as some of the department scenarios that had been put forth that reflected 5% reductions. We're looking at things like the things I mentioned there. We're looking at things like homelessness, crime initiatives, public safety, human services. So really, I feel like I was able to get a good feeling of where our community's at. Now, is everyone going to be happy in a budget process? You're not going to get there. But I was elected to make decisions and use my judgment about what the best balance is for the community, and I think this struck it.
$26 on the average home, right? 200 and some thousand?
A little over 239,000 is the
average home
now. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be insensitive to those. I mean, $26 is $26,
Sure.
But it doesn't sound like a big number. 4%, you know, that's in an economy that isn't growing much at all, and where people's salaries in some cases are being frozen or cut.
Yeah.
You know what our state employees are going through.
Sure do.
That's going to sting a little bit.
Sure, and I'm very sensitive to that. But I think what would sting more is if we were not able to keep our full contingency of 911 operators, if we had to cut back on emergency services. You know, things in this budget that are included are also an upgrade of our emergency siren system. When there's a tornado, I think it's important that everyone hears it. We have, we're updating our dispatch system in 911 with a computer-aided dispatch, which will allow first responders to get to a heart attack victim earlier. We're upgrading our countywide emergency radio system so that all of our responders can talk to each other over the same channels, and so that people all through Dane County have access to the same type of response. So again, when you look at what we get for the money and what it would look like without it, this is the balance. Now, we could have gone higher. I chose not to. We could have cut some more of those vital services like 911. I chose not to. But you're right, it's a very difficult decision, and you have to do the best job you can to balance all of those interests.
And give us an example of some of the other additions, some of the places where you decided that new spending or continued spending was worth doing.
Yeah. Well, for example, the opiates task force. This is a good example of a partnership between the city and the county through the city-county public health department. As you know, heroin overdoses and prescription drug overdoses are on the rise. Automobile crashes because of people shooting up heroin and getting in their car are on the rise. Our public's endangered. So we have an opiates initiative to really wrap the community's head around this problem, because it's all been falling on law enforcement right now, but we're going to involve law enforcement, the medical community, our schools, et cetera, to assess this problem and come up with an action plan, something like that. We look at another initiative I have We have challenged neighborhoods throughout Dane County, be it, if we're talking about Allied Drive or neighborhoods in Sun Prairie, where we really need to put some energy and focus into there. I'm going to have a life skills initiative that is going to create an entirely new crew with Operation Fresh Start, who works with young people to provide life skills and work skills. It's an evidence-based program that's one of the most successful programs at reducing recidivism, getting high school diplomas, and helping young people. We're going to have young people from different challenged neighborhoods. We're going to open up more slots for them at Operation Fresh Start so that we can start addressing the root causes of some of the challenges we have in our community. And with some of the savings that we've gotten through some of our efficiencies, we're going to put some more money into prevention aorta services. Drugs and alcohol cost our community both in terms of lives, public safety, and tax dollars. We need to put our dollars that we have where they'll make the most difference, and that's in treating the root causes of some of these scourges.
If you're up for it, when we come back, you just completed, 8 public hearings on economic development in the county. Let's talk a little bit about that when we come back right after this. I'm back with Dane County Executive Joe Parisi as we talk about his proposed 2012 budget. And before we talk about job creation, I do need to ask, you mentioned positions saved through the Huber Center. In terms of the county workforce, what's the impact of this budget?
Right now we have about 2,200 people in Dane County's government's workforce. That's down historically from around 2,400. This budget specifically will unfund close to 50 vacant positions, and the reason those are vacant is mainly due to hiring freezes that we've had to have in place all year that County Executive Falk put into place when the governor introduced his budget repair bill. There will also be approximately 15 layoffs in this budget.
So unfunded means they're not eliminated, but they just will remain.
They'll remain unfilled and unfunded.
Into the future.
Correct.
What did you hear at these public hearings, Joe? And how have you translated that into any sort of planning or action steps for economic growth in the county?
Sure. Well, I held a total of 6 economic development summits across the county with different sectors, ag, high-tech, manufacturing, et cetera, to gather input from people in the community. And what we heard, first of all, one of my first questions was, does the county need an entity like this? Should the county be involved in economic development? As you know, I think it should, but I wanted to hear from the community. And the nearly unanimous response was yes, but make sure you do it right. And so the input I received is that there are a number of niches the county can fill. Helping to coordinate all of the different efforts, the different municipalities, looking at coordinating the needs of business as far as employees and training with our workforce and with our educational institutions to help ensure that everyone's on the same page, and to be a face of economic development and to show that Dane County's interested in this and that it's a priority. Because we can't just rest on our laurels in Dane County. We have a lot to offer here, a lot that we can build on and resources to draw from, but we have to pull it together and coordinate and be active. So in my budget, I've pulled together an economic development office. We're calling it the Office of Jobs and Prosperity, that will be an office in the county executive's office. And we will have a director, and then we're pulling over an economic support specialist who currently resides in the planning department to put in that office also. And so that office will work not only throughout the community, but within county government, with any entities, for example, in the extension where they're working with ag and local foods, to reach out and work with that branch and to coordinate throughout county government to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure our workforce is skilled and get the training it needs, and to make sure that businesses can thrive in Dane County and that we can start building our employment base and add to our tax base.
Obviously, the extension makes sense. The connection with the county is part of the mission of the extension. But for example, just Madison College, for example.
Yep.
What's the potential there?
Yep.
Because it seems like could be an important player here.
Oh, they absolutely are, and we actually worked with them during this whole process, as we did with Thrive and the Chamber and the Workforce Development Boards. And Madison College is really one of our gems. The university is incredibly important. But one of the things I think that gets overlooked a little bit is how important Madison College. I still want to call them MATC.
Yeah, me too. And Edgewood has an important role here.
Yes.
But in terms of skills training, I think we tend to think of Madison College.
That's right. And because one of the things we need to be able to do, we need to be in touch with our businesses. We need to find out not only what do you need now, but what are your plans a couple years down the road, either for expansion or retooling. And we need to make sure that our educational institutions are on the same page as our businesses so that we're getting the workforce trained in the skills that our local businesses are going to need and need to be able to utilize in order for them to thrive.
Now, you, to some degree, and your team have to kind of put on your amateur economist hats when you put together a budget. How would you describe your outlook for 12 as it influenced your budget preparation? I mean, what are you kind of planning for?
Yeah. We budgeted very conservatively. We hope for the best, but budget for a conservative outlook. I mean, one of the great unknowns is how are the effects of the budget repair bill that really started taking hold in September with 20% of our workforce, which is from the public sector, having smaller paychecks basically as a result of increased contributions. That's a lot of money being pulled out of our local economy. So we budgeted conservatively because we're not sure what that effect will be. Now in the current budget, we benefited because former Executive Falk and the County Board budgeted conservatively when they looked at their sales tax projections. And sales tax was a little higher than they had budgeted for, so that helped us. But we don't want to paint too rosy of a picture for budgeting purposes because we want to be able, if sales tax is more than it was, if the economy takes off, we put that into the reserve fund, and that helps us with the bond rating houses. But we're hopeful. We're hopeful that having an economic development initiative, that having a relatively conservative budget that addresses the root causes of a lot of the challenges we face in our community will be helpful. But you know, it's a great unknown. You know, the last few years have been something that no one's really been able to predict.
You see some potential for job growth in Dane County in 12?
I do. You know, we have things going on, you know, throughout the county right now where we actually have businesses expanding. Yeah. We have job openings that are just waiting for the right skills match. We have a workforce that's second to none. As far as, you know, ready to show up for work. We have the university. We have so many resources. Yeah. And I think if we focus and keep moving forward with this focus, we'll get through this. It's going to take some time. It's taken some time. But, you know, we're strong, Dane County. We have more resources than most. We just need to pull them together.
Is your budget online?
Yes.
People could go to the Dane County website and find it, and there's summaries of stuff online. Yeah. Great. Joe, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, we're going to wrap up For the Record. My thanks to Dane County Executive Joe Parisi for coming in today. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see you next Sunday for another For the Record. My thanks to Dane County Executive Joe Parisi for coming in today. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll see you next Sunday for another For the Record.